Raising the Bets is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to Raising the Bets. We're a Catholic couple raising 5 kids outside of Boston. Join us as we share the joys and challenges of marriage, homeschool, and our adventures near and far as we make sense of the world and experience the best parts of our culture. I'm Don Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
Welcome to Morning Zoo. Sorry.
That is like the most over-the-top reading of the intro that I've ever heard.
Trying to inject some energy into this podcast right now. Woo! So I was doing my best Morning Zoo voice.
I don't even know what Morning Zoo is.
You know, like morning radio shows, like morning drive time radio shows where they're wacky and wild and they have all kinds of weird off the wall things going on. And there's a DJ who talks like this.
I've never heard that called Morning Zoo.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's kind of a thing. I mean,
is that a Boston thing?
No, I was going to say it's not a thing they ever called it here in the Boston area, but it's a phrase I've heard applied to morning radio in general, like around the country.
Okay.
Like the morning wacky personality driven radio where it's not about music per se. It's about the personalities.
That's the stuff I avoid like the plague.
Yes. See, I mean, I used to enjoy it. Okay. A little walk down memory lane in Boston radio. There was Kiss 108 with Maddie in the morning. There was also Charles Aquadera on WBCN. That was when I was in high school. That was the morning radio that I listened to. But yeah, you know, just memory lane.
It's the last thing I want first thing in the morning is like somebody yelling at me. Good Lord.
Get up and get going. So on the way to work, you're late. You know, actually, a good example is the radio thing on Groundhog Day.
Oh yeah. Gross.
You know, I Got You Babe, and then those two guys.
Yeah. Oh, so annoying.
Could you imagine waking up to that
every single day?
Every single day. Well, a lot of people do.
Well, you know, but Bill Murray's response to that was eventually to try to off himself multiple times.
Well, but then he got beyond that to seeking holiness and good for its own sake. Yeah, not so much holiness, but good for its own sake.
But I do understand the impulse to like throw yourself in front of a moving vehicle
after a while. Yeah. So, all that said, I was making dinner the other night, and as I like to do, I like to play music while I was making dinner. And
yes, you do.
I've been obviously playing the 80s playlist a lot. Actually, I don't think that was the 80s playlist. It was just the general random stuff from the music library, our iTunes or Apple Music library, and Queen's "We Will Rock You" came up, and that came up, gave us the story. Like we had to tell the story of how when Bella was born,
her first night in the hospital,
Salem Hospital, and they had this. So you know, we were brand new at all this.
It was a very late night.
You had just had your C-section.
I was exhausted, and Bella would not sleep.
Yes, she would not sleep. You were having trouble getting her to latch on. There was a whole that. And so they had this chair that for the dad to sleep on. It was like a rocking chair that sort of unfolded.
No, they had a chair that unfolded. They also had a rocking chair.
There were two different chairs.
You're conflating two different chairs.
Okay. So sitting the chair that unfolded was a whole nother story.
Yes.
I was sitting in the rocking chair, and I've got Bella, and I'm holding her as I'm rocking, and just quietly.
It was a very squeaky rocking chair.
Very squeaky, and it was squeaking like this. And it was very quiet in the room except for the squeak, and then suddenly I just quietly started going, we will rock you.
It was eerily like he hit on the fact like that was exactly the sound that the chair was making. Now, mind you, I'm recovering from a major abdominal surgery, but it's late at night and I'm punch drunk, and so I started laughing and then trying not to laugh, desperately trying not to laugh.
And, yeah, we're both exhausted.
We're so tired.
So it was so funny. I mean, it's just what other song too? We Will Rock You. I'm like rocking her in the chair. And Oh man! So every time I hear that song now, that comes to mind. And Bella had never heard that song, or she didn't remember hearing that story. She didn't
remember the story, and then she's like, "Well, Sophie got Amazing Grace, and I got We Will Rock You."
yeah. When Sophie was a baby, she got sung Amazing Grace as her what was the soothing song, whatever you want to call it. Oh yeah. What did the other kids? So what did you sing? You said we sing Amazing Grace, and then there's another Marian hymn.
No, I sang Amazing Grace, and I sang Amazing Grace, and I sang Amazing Grace. I would sometimes make up, like, I would sing the Litany of Saints to the tune of Frere Jacques.
Oh, okay.
And then there was the butterfly song.
I made up the butterfly song for Bella for when she was taking her baths. Fly away, butterfly, fly away, come back tomorrow.
And that became sort of my song that I sang to her and Sophie too at bedtime.
Which I kind of based off a song from the movie Once, but the tune diverged from that. So we had just watched it once when that came up. Right. Anyway, so hey, musical lullabies. So that was a funny story. So let's talk about a little bit about what
was it?
No. So let's talk about what was going on this week. And timing, comedy is everything. So on Saturday, we had a big Scout event. The Scout O. I think of Dr. What was not Dr. Strange. Mike Myers.
Austin Powers.
Dr. Evil.
Dr. Evil.
That's a no. So we went to the Scout O, which is an orienteering event put on by the New England Orienteering Club, which it's a thing. Like, what do? They just walk out in the woods and orient themselves?
Right.
I guess there's orienteering competitions, which let me tell you, that must be that's on like an ESPN, the Ocho. I mean, that's a sport.
I wonder if it's kind of like geocaching. Like, do they hide things and you have to go find them?
That would be fun. If it were like beer at the end of it, that would make it a fun competition. Or money, like hiding money. Whoever can navigate to the location.
In any case, the Scouts didn't have anything like that.
Scouts had no beer at the end.
They just had compasses and directions, and
all of our kids were involved. So the boys' troop went off and did theirs. The girls' troop, they did theirs. And Lucy's Weebelow's Den was along as well. And they went and did some orienteering as well. And they were the fastest. They did their route in 30 minutes. The older girls, they did theirs in like an hour.
I asked and they didn't remember.
Yeah. Of course they didn't. And then the older boys got lost. They were wandering in the woods. They eventually found their way back.
Now, Ben and Anthony said they both knew.
They knew where they were going.
Which way to go, but the leaders,
the senior patrol leader and his assistant,
were not listening to the boys who knew where they had gone wrong. And so if they'd listened to our boys, they wouldn't have got lost.
And also the boys' patrol leader, Davi, he also knew. And I told them, this is a lesson in leadership. Leadership isn't just being in charge. Leadership is understanding the resources you have, including the knowledge of the people that you're leading, and using it appropriately, not just giving orders. Leadership isn't just giving orders. Leadership is understanding, knowing what resources you have. So that was at least a good lesson in leadership for them. So that was all morning. So we had to get up out of the house by 7:30, which meant we left the house at 7:45. You'll never guess who was the last person out of the house into the car. Bella. And so we and it's about a 45-minute drive. So we were there around 8:30. We had to be there early enough because the parking lot at this Scout reservation is really small. It's like you've been to Squanto, right?
Once.
Yeah. And they have this huge field for parking for like their events. Right. They have this little parking lot, like you're pulling off to go hiking in the woods, like those little lots.
Yeah, like a little trailhead.
Yeah, it was like there's not nearly enough parking, and it's like the largest Scout reservation in New England or something like that. It's like huge. It's like, why do you not have more parking? Anyway, so you had to get there really early in order to get a spot. So I have a feeling that some of the other Scout leaders, they thought I was going to be like tagging along, but my intention was to let them go and do their thing, and I was going to stay with the van and hang out and read my book and sit in my chair in the sun and relax. That was my plan for the morning. There was a possibility that they would go back out again after lunch, but I had a feeling that our kids, at least some of our kids, would be done.
Lucy said she was bitterly disappointed that she only got to do one run and that everybody wanted to leave because she really was invested in going out again.
She was having fun, and I felt bad, but the problem is, so she was done early, right? So they were hanging around. But the boys got back late, and so they didn't get back till like 12:31, which meant, and then they had to have lunch, which meant if they went back out again, with their troop, it would be like, if they didn't get lost, 2:33, we wouldn't get home till 4:30.
And if they got lost, it could be even later. And
I was making dinner, so I was like, nope, I'm sorry. And everyone else was like, yeah, we kind of want to go. So that's what we did, and so we came home. You got a rare morning all to yourself.
Yep.
What'd you do?
Well, my sister actually called before I got out of bed, and so we had a nice long video chat. She was going to go play D&D with some friends, and so I chatted with her while she got ready for her day, and then once she took off for her D&D game, I went to Whole Foods and got some pastries because I had a desire for fancy pastries. And there aren't really any pastry shops anywhere nearby. Whole Foods was the closest place I could think of to get like a decent.
Yeah, I can't think of there's got to be something. This bears investigating. Well, what about Montilio's?
They don't really have, I mean, they have more like cakes and cookies and stuff, but
the one in Braintree? I mean, the one in Brockton is more cakes and stuff. But
I've never been to the one in Braintree. Anyway,
okay.
I couldn't think of, I like really wanted something more like Danish turnover croissant sorts of things.
Bear claw.
But like the nicer ones that you can get at the grocery store.
Sure.
Anyway, I also, while I was at Whole Foods, picked up some sushi and some other things that had been on my list of things that they carry and other places don't.
Yes, you got hatched chilies. Lucy was reading the labels as she emptied the bag.
Hatched chilies.
Yeah, well, she called them hatched chilies.
Hatched.
And mole negro or mole negro. I'm like, Lucy, mole negro. Don't say it the other way. Yeah. So yeah, she was reading the labels. She was also when we saw the Whole Foods bag when we came in, it was like, oh, I wonder if Mom got sushi. She's like, no, she wouldn't do that without us. I'm like, sure, I'd do it without you guys.
She wouldn't do that without us. Yes, I would.
Don't you know our lives revolve around making sure that they have everything their little heart desires, and that we shouldn't have anything that they don't. Yes, it sounds like it was very nice for you.
It was quiet. It could have been longer. Like if you'd been gone the whole day, I wouldn't have been sad.
Yeah, I know that.
It's okay. I appreciated the quiet.
The quiet morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we got back around 2:30. I mean, it was most of the day into the early afternoon. So on the way home, we stopped at the Vietnamese grocery in the next town over. And I needed to get a few more ingredients for dinner, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But yeah, that was good. Anything else? I'm trying to think of what else has been going on. Not much. I mean, otherwise it's been
a quiet week.
Been a quiet week here on Lake Wobegon, and although busy week coming up, we're gonna have by the time you're listening to this, it's already happened. But we're gonna have Halloween, and the kids will be able to go trick or treating. Last year, they couldn't trick or treat, as I mentioned before, because we were out of our house in a strange neighborhood. But they all got sick. I forgot they had all gotten sick.
They would have tried to go trick or treating if they hadn't been sick.
They hadn't been sick, and then we also had that big storm, which had interrupted our search for costumes and that sort of thing. But yeah, it was mostly them being sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was.
I wasn't going to go let them out infecting strangers.
There's been an outbreak in Plymouth, and then the other thing. 2 years ago, on today, on the 30th, October 30th, we got 4 inches of snow. Do you remember that?
Right.
I was just looking at my Facebook memories.
I remember saying that the world had decided to go as Christmas for Halloween.
That's right. I remember that now. Man, yeah. This has been a beautiful. We've had quite a bit of rain, but we've had a lot of beautiful days this fall. Knock on wood. So, all right. So that's what's been going on. Let's talk about what we've been eating. So I had to get some ingredients because I was going to make this Pho Ga dish. So pho, you may know, is a Vietnamese soup.
A lot of people say pho, and it's okay if you say it like that. No. Really.
I'm sorry. You must be authentic like me and say things like Beijing, or there's or Qatar instead of Qatar for the country. I always laugh at news anchors who feel the need to say everything, pronounce everything correctly. Okay, so pho. Pho is, you may know it as a beef noodle dish. There is a chicken version called Pho Ga, Vietnamese for chicken. So it's basically Vietnamese chicken noodle soup. And it was another one of these Cook's Illustrated recipes. And really, almost everything on the ingredient list you could get at a regular grocery store. It's not, I mean, it's a decent one anyway.
Right.
It has, so it starts with a whole chicken, onion, a big piece of ginger, salt, sugar, coriander seed, cinnamon stick, star anise. That's a little specialty.
The star anise you might have a hard time finding.
Yeah, I buy my spices online from thespicehouse.com. So I got some from there. Whole cloves, fish sauce. And that's for making the broth. Because with pho, you the broth making the broth is a big element of it, and you usually do that separate. It's a big separate step. Then for the pho itself, you need rice noodles, and that's what I was picking up at one of the things I was picking up at the Vietnamese grocery store. Then more onions sliced thin, some scallion. Bean sprouts I picked up at the store, but you can get bean sprouts at the regular grocery store.
Sometimes.
Yeah. You know, I didn't get add to the thing was cilantro. We could have had cilantro in it. That would have been good. And Thai basil. I wanted Thai basil. And then you can also have, lime wedges. You could have sliced chili peppers, hoisin sauce, sriracha, that sort of thing. So the way you make it is you take the whole chicken and you quarter it. So you break it down into breasts and thighs and wings. Okay. And then you put them in a big pot with water, and you bring it to, along with the onion, one whole onion halved, ginger, salt, sugar, bring it to a boil, and then simmer it. And you gotta clean off all the scum that comes to the surface, which I did pretty good. It was a pretty clear broth. I was very proud of that. And then you cook it until the breasts are done at 160 to 165. You take those out, and then you continue to cook it. You add the coriander seeds, the cinnamon stick, the star anise, and the cloves, and you simmer it for an hour. Okay, and then you take the leg quarters out and strain it through a fine mesh strainer, which I'm glad I did, because that you could tell in the cheesecloth. It caught a lot of more of the scummy stuff, so it was a nice clean broth. So now you have this beautiful chickeny, spiced broth, which is beautiful. And then you take, and then you add the fish sauce to it at that point, put it on the stove, and now that's ready. The broth is basically ready. Shred the chicken. You cook the noodles, which I have to figure out how to cook rice noodles, because when I make them, they always come out a gummy mess. They're not.
Do you rinse them?
Rinse them.
After cooking.
It didn't say to.
Yes, it does.
Place the noodles in a large bowl. Let sit for 20 minutes. A large bowl of water. Let sit. Then bring 2 quarts of water to boil. And then bring 2 quarts of water to boil in large pot. Drain noodles. Return broth to boil. Add the noodles to the boiling water. Okay. Cook for 30 to 60 seconds. Drain immediately and divide among the serving bowls. If you're going to put them directly into the bowls, then you don't need to rinse them. But if you're going to let them sit in a bowl, you need to rinse them under water after you take them out
to get rid of some of the extra starch.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to be too starchy.
That must be what it is. It also took forever to cook. They didn't take 30 to 60 seconds. The rice noodles, there was like 2 aisles of rice noodles of every varying thickness. I got ones that were slightly thicker that kind of reminded me of what I would get at the Vietnamese restaurant, but I might have got away with.
Did you go were you following the instructions on the noodle package or in the recipe?
In the recipe.
Yeah, always follow the instructions on the noodle package.
That would be good advice if the noodle package's instructions were not in Vietnamese.
That's the pitfall of buying your noodles at the Vietnamese shop.
Or I could have looked for a different package of rice noodles that had English instructions, which I will do in the future.
Yeah.
But anyway, in any case, that was a minor inconvenience. It made a ton, like 12, like not 12. Is it? How big is that pot? The big blue Dutch oven. Is it 12 quarts?
I don't think so.
8 quarts? I mean, I think it's like 8 or 9 quarts. It's really big. It was like, you should have leftover broth with this. The kids and us ate all of it.
There was no leftover.
There was like a half a quart, like 2 cups of broth left over. Oh, I also added vegetables. I added shiitake mushrooms and carrot and celery and bell pepper, which isn't traditional and wasn't in the recipe, but I wanted to add some more, vegetable to it to maybe get the kids to maybe eat some of that. They ate some of it, but not much. But it was so good. This was a 100% meal. They all raved about it. And I was pretty happy with it.
Ben wasn't thrilled.
He wasn't. He ate a whole bowl. He did eat a whole bowl. In fact, I think he even had seconds.
He didn't like the vegetables in it. Maybe that was.
He didn't like the vegetables, but he liked the broth. He really liked that in the chicken. And again, it's another one of those soups where everyone adds things to it. You know, again, that rule holds up. Our kids anyway like meals where they have to build them themselves. You know, they have lots of little bowls to add things from into their bowl. So it did have a lot of leftover chicken. So I got an 8-pound chicken. The recipe calls for a 4-pound chicken, but of course I doubled everything for our recipe. So I had an 8-pound chicken, and there was about a pound of chicken left over from it. So that was pretty good. And so what I ended up doing with that was and I also had a bunch of basil, Thai basil left over.
It's probably because I didn't really put a lot of chicken in my soup. I didn't want a lot of meat.
Well, the recipe just says that you'll have extra chicken. Like it has you use a lot more chicken just to make the broth more chickeny. You know, if you cooked less chicken in it, then it wouldn't be as flavorful. So they say you save the rest of the chicken for another recipe. So I made Thai basil chicken for dinner tonight. I did add another chicken breast because there was only about a pound of chicken left over. So I added some more chicken to bulk it up and to make it enough for a meal for us. The interesting thing is the recipe that I used called for like chopping into little cubes the chicken, and this was shredded, but the shredded was a little too shredded for this.
It would have been better in something like
a chicken salad,
like a tortilla soup, maybe?
Tortilla soup or chicken tacos or something like that. Yeah. I mean, it's got kind of Vietnamese flavors, so it'd be like a fusion taco or something, which actually may not be a bad idea. But but I wanted to use the Thai basil.
Yeah.
It would be a shame to let that go bad because it's so good. I love the smell and the taste of it.
The texture of the chicken was kind of wrong for the Thai basil. I
could have saved the chicken and just used the Thai basil with chicken from the freezer. And I could have done that. So lesson learned. But it was still pretty good.
It was, the flavors were good.
The flavors were good.
The shredded chicken texture was kind of wrong.
It was a little off-putting. Yeah. So, but this was probably one of the most successful new recipes we've had in a long time. So I'm really pleased with that. And it was really good, and it looked good. It was very pretty. So I was really happy with it. All right. So, shall we move on to talk about the things we've been reading?
Sure.
Why don't you tell us about the book you finished?
What book did I finish?
The Grief of Stones. You literally just told me to put it on the list 5 minutes ago.
I had to look it up in my Kindle app in order to remember to tell you. And then as soon as I looked it up, I forgot it again.
Okay. The Grief of Stones.
Okay. The Grief of Stones is the second sequel to The Goblin Emperor, which I really loved. I loved The Goblin Emperor. It was one of my favorite books of last year or the year before. So The Grief of Stones, like the one that came before it, whose name I cannot remember off the top of my head. It's almost like a spin-off. Like the Goblin Emperor is sort of Byzantine political high fantasy. Whereas, so in the two sequels, she took a minor character who is sort of a priest detective. And then these two novels are like detective mystery novels, but in a fantasy setting.
So the other book was called The Witness for the Dead.
Witness for the Dead, right. So in the world of the Goblin Emperor, you have these, it's got this sort of a priestly class. There's lots of different gods, but there's a priestly class who act as the Witness for the Dead is like kind of like an advocate. Like if there's a question about the death, then they sort of investigate and then they give an official like witness, like telling about the person's life and the circumstances of their death. And it feels like more than just like a private investigator, because they're an official government functionary and they have like this very ceremonial role in the society. And their whole culture has this like roles of witnesses for different things. And the witness is sort of, as a cleric, has a kind of, in terms of, they almost feel like they're sort of witnessing on behalf of the person, but in front of the gods or something. I don't know. It's hard to explain. But the Witnesses for the Dead have a special sort of magical gift where they can touch the dead person and read their memories.
Yep.
So people come to him. He's got this official role and people come to him. And sometimes it's simple, like in the story, there's this bakery and the person who had their special scone recipe died. And they don't know where the recipe is. And the person had always promised to pass it on at some point, but it was a secret recipe. And so he died without passing it on. So they go to the Witness for the Dead and they say, can you please help us find the scone recipe? So he goes and he touches the dead body and he's like, okay, I'm not exactly sure how helpful this will be, but I'm getting an image of nutmeg. And they're like, we tried putting nutmeg in the recipe. It wasn't right. And he's like, no, where do you keep the nutmegs? And they open up the box and it has a false bottom. And so the recipe was in the nutmeg box.
Ask him what the Netflix password is.
Exactly. And so some of it is like, some of his job is these like little routine, like we need information from the dead person. Like, where did they leave the will? That sort of thing.
Right.
And then sometimes it's, how did you die? Like, who killed you? Were you murdered? Those sorts of questions.
That would make murder a difficult proposition because you can't really silence the victim.
Well, but the thing is that he's only going to, like, he doesn't do this to every single dead person. So, like, he only does it if there's a question about whether or not they died by foul circumstances.
If you get a big knife sticking out of your chest, you might have been murdered.
Right. It does. So it does mean that, like, the murdered person would have, like, the murderer would have to not be seen by the person who they're trying to kill or try to, like, kill them with no trace. I mean, in the story, there is a person who was pushed off a bridge and it was dark and she didn't see the person who pushed her. And so, like, his reading her memories doesn't really help.
Right.
Or the person who was poisoned and
they don't know who put what in the drink or whatever.
Right. But there they did an autopsy and her intestines smelled like whatever the poison was. So they were able to tell that she had been poisoned.
Ew.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically the format is, it's a procedure. It's a police procedural.
Okay.
But with magic. And so the main character is an elf. And in the world of the Goblin Emperor, you have elves and goblins. And there is a country where the goblins are like in ascendancy, but in the country where you are, the elves are the ruling class and the goblins are sort of the underclass. Okay. And there's a lot of prejudice against goblins.
Right.
Although they're sort of second class citizens, but they're not like actively oppressed. I mean, they're sort of kind of oppressed.
So the blurb on Amazon says, a vividly imagined fantasy of court intrigue and dark magics in a steampunk-inflected world.
Yeah, it is kind of steampunky in that you have like airships.
Oh, if you have airships, it's steampunk. Period.
Right.
That's how you...
Exactly. Airships and like, there's some technology.
Is there steam-powered mechanisms?
There are like, yeah, I mean, the magic is more of the sort of like reading the dead people's minds variety. There's not a whole lot of like magic going on. In the Goblin Emperor, there's like this elaborate clockwork bridge. And if you've got clockwork and airships.
Oh, yeah. Now we're talking.
It's steampunk.
We're now in steampunk land.
Right. So it's elven steampunk.
Elven steampunk. Yeah. Band.
Right. It's anyway, my initial reaction to Witness for the Dead was I loved The Goblin Emperor, and this is an okay book. It's a good book. It's just, it doesn't have the magic that The Goblin Emperor had. But it's good. It's like they stand on their own. Yeah. It's almost a different genre because it's a detective. It's a detective novel. Yeah. It's a detective novel set in the same world.
Interesting. There's apparently a third one coming. The Tomb of Dragons.
Ooh, that'll be good.
Yeah.
So, cool. So yeah, and then I'm reading more John le Carré. I just got a new one.
Speaking of spy novels.
I finished
another novel.
Woohoo!
This is the 12th book in the Mitch Rapp series. It's another one of those Mitch Rapp. If you saw the movie American Assassin, starring he was the first Batman movie.
Michael Keaton. That's what I meant.
Okay. So Michael Keaton was in that. So American Assassin was sort of the origin story, based on the origin story of Mitch Rapp. So Mitch Rapp is America's #1 assassin who hunts down bad guys and terrorists and and works for the CIA. Well, in this 12th novel, he's gotten himself into a point where there's a new president and the first lady in the White House who are bad people in the sense of they're not there because they believe in America, that they're there for the power, and he's a demagogue. He's really is able to whip up his people, his minions, and his plan is to clearly for him to serve 2 terms, then his wife will serve 2 terms, and by the end of the 16 years, they have this plan to basically undermine American democracy and take permanent power.
So they want to create a political dynasty.
Yes, they're going to create an autocracy by the dint of ginning up their demagoguery and people's acclaim. People will demand that they remain in power. So, and they're a real threat. So, standing in the way is Mitch and the people around him, including the director of the CIA and this sort of thing, and the richest man in the world, who is the world's first trillionaire, who Mitch has happened to have recently saved his life from an attempt on his life that it was orchestrated by the president of the United States. He sees him as a rival. So it's a very convoluted thing. Mitch has a family now that he's taking care of, and how does he get, like, how do you go to war with the president of the United States without killing the people who work for him who are your friends or just good loyal Americans who are doing their job.
The Secret Service,
right. And military and other people like that, right? The guy. So how do you and go to war with him without destabilizing the American government and America and the world? So it was interesting from that point of view. Like, how does he get out of this situation? And there's several. And meanwhile, they keep sending assassins after him, and how does he get out of it? And so it was a pretty good book. The first third was a little bit... Sometimes these stories, it feels like the author is like, how bad of a hole can I dig? How deep in the hole can I get this character? And then watch him get out of it. And it's the digging the hole that sometimes gets me. It just seems so hopeless and like a slog down. I'm like, can we get to the turning point where things start to get better and better and better? Because
right,
I just don't like that down part to go on too long. So but It's pretty good. I mean, it's 12 novels in. So the author, the original author, is Vince Flynn. He's died, which is kind of interesting because it's like the Tom Clancy.
Right, Tom Clancy.
Who also died, and his series is being continued by another author. And this is the same way. I don't know how much longer this can go. I mean, when this first started, Mitch, the backstory for Mitch Rapp is that his girlfriend died in the Pan Am Lockerbie bombing in 1983 when he was in college. Like, if this, like, they've quietly ignored that by this point, because at this point, Mitch would be in his 60s.
Right.
He would not be super assassin. He'd be, getting fitted for a walker. Not literally, but he would not be an American assassin, at the peak of his, or just past the peak of his vitality. He'd be, heading out the pasture. So they've quietly ignored that in order to keep the series going.
Right. We're up ignoring the timeline, wave hands, pretend like it doesn't exist.
Right. It's kind of like they do with James Bond, I mean,
right. There's no way James Bond he's like eternal, immortal.
James Bond is like 110 years old right now.
He's Highlander.
If you were. Yes. So, well, Sean Connery.
Exactly.
The Spaniard. So, with the Scottish accent. So, back to Mitch Rapp. I don't know how much longer the books can continue to go on and still be interesting and that sort of thing. And
still be interesting. Like, they could keep going and going like the Energizer Bunny.
Yes. There was a series I read when I was younger about this Marine whose family is murdered by the mafia. And he's like a top Marine sniper. And he comes back on bereavement leave and then goes on a one-man vengeance spree against the mob in America. Just hunting down every mobster he can find in America. The Executioner series. But they went on for years and years and years with that. And they got to the point where it became a book of the month thing, where they would pump out a book every month. It was a factory operation. It was Pulp Fiction. It was, yeah. And it just got ridiculous. I lapped him up because I love this sort of story, but I outgrew it at one point. But anyway, so that's Oath of Loyalty by Kyle Mills is the author now. So things we've watched. I finally got around to watching Top Gun Maverick, and let me tell you, it was everything everyone said it would be. Everyone I talked to said it was really good. Oh, it's a really good movie. And the funny thing is, it's not a complicated movie. There's not a lot of... it focuses on Tom Cruise's character, Maverick. Pete Mitchell, that's right, his character's name. Doesn't really focus a lot on the background, secondary characters. It mirrors the first movie. It doesn't copy it, but it sort of mirrors it. There's a big mission that takes up the final set piece. There's a love interest that he's trying to, work with as competition. But in this one, it's about him being put out to pasture in his 40-year career of being a maverick. Bucking the system has caught up to him, and he's, there's a lot of people out to get him. Really nice moment was Val Kilmer in it as Admiral Iceman Kazansky. Mm-hmm. Val Kilmer, in real life, was dying of throat cancer when they made this, and so they actually built that into the character, where he was the character who had throat cancer, was near the end of his time in service, and so he was, and they had become and stayed friends, and he had really been one protecting Maverick all this time. Val Kilmer died soon after. He actually died this past year.
Oh wow! I don't think I realized he died.
Yeah. So, it stars, in addition to Tom Cruise, it stars the actor who was in The Offer, young actor. I should always have this stuff up before.
Right? Why didn't you do this before you?
I don't know. I always bring up the mass readings to have those ready, but Miles Teller, he plays. Remember Goose? He was the Maverick's guy in the back seat who dies in the original Top Gun. Spoilers for a 40-year-old movie.
I saw it once.
Okay, so
I don't like,
so Goose dies, and Goose was a family man, had a wife and a kid. Well, this Miles Teller plays Goose's son. He's now a pilot, Navy pilot, who resents Maverick, father's death.
Right.
But the flying is awesome. The flying sequences, and they said we're doing real flying sequences just like we did in the original. We're in planes, in the air, F-18s. We're doing that. We're not doing CG and projecting it around them on a screen and pretending. No, it's all real flying. So it's just the flying is awesome. It's really great. I mean, some of it is ridiculous in the real world. Physics wouldn't allow it. There are issues with verisimilitude. Nevertheless, It's a huge amount of fun. There's even a cameo at the end of they're going up against. They have to bomb a nuclear enrichment facility in an unnamed country that also has old F-14 Tomcats. Which there's only one country in the world that had F-14 Tomcats apart from the U.S. Navy. That was Iran. So basically, it's Iran that they're going up against. And so at one point, he and Rooster, that's Goose's son, have crashed in after the mission.
So they're really committed to the bird nomenclature?
Apparently, with these characters. I'm kind of spoiling a little bit, but there's an F-14 that shows up at one point, which is like, yes, it was a great moment. So it was a good movie. I really enjoyed it. But even more than the movie, it actually impacted me emotionally because it takes me back to a very important time in my life. Because the Top Gun came out in 1986, which was the year that I went to Navy ROTC. At the time, I was going to become a naval aviator. I didn't go into it because of Top Gun. I actually had started the process before Top Gun had come out. Right. But Top Gun came out that summer as I was going into college and ROTC. So everyone, all of my classmates who were there, were all like super pumped. This was big. And so it kind of brought me back to that. Like hearing they play the theme music, dun 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 dun, all that. It's all in there. I mean, it was really, I don't know. It really hit me on another level. So it was good.
Okay.
So we watched a movie together.
We did.
On Apple TV Plus called Ray and Raymond.
It was fun.
It was a fun movie. So stars Ewan McGregor and Ethan Hawke.
Were great casting. Great team.
Yeah.
They were great.
In fact, I think everybody who was in it did pretty great. Like the whole cast was pretty good.
Oh yeah, it was good.
And they play two half brothers whose abusive father that they haven't been in contact with for years has died. And they're both named Raymond, but Ewan McGregor's character, they call him Raymond, and Ethan Hawke's character, they call him Ray to distinguish.
Right.
They have the same father, but different mothers.
And evidently the two mothers had become good friends after
divorcing
both. I think actually one was married to him,
the mistress,
and one was
one was the wife.
But they became friends after having survived this horrible toxic man. Mm-hmm. And their sons were best friends growing up,
right?
But had drifted apart, partly because they each reminded the other of their dad. I think was the implication.
And it was very interesting because they go to the funeral. The dad had left some things to each of them. Had also left instructions. For that, his last wishes, which the most significant of which is that they personally dig his grave.
This was, I thought, kind of a brilliant plot device.
Yes.
In that it means that the two of them, they don't just show up and then leave.
Right.
They show up and then they have to wait around until it's time to go to the graveyard, the cemetery. They have to dig the grave, and it takes a long time.
Dig a 6-foot grave takes a while.
Right. And then they have to fill it.
Yeah.
Right. And then they have to fill it in too.
Right.
And so there's this sort of moment where like all the characters, like the second almost half of the movie, it feels like.
Yeah. half the movie takes place at the cemetery.
Right. Takes place at the cemetery with everyone just sort of gathered there while they're digging the grave. And there's other brothers show up who you didn't expect.
From Florida. Jewish.
They didn't even know.
Acrobat brothers.
Right. Brothers who they didn't even know existed.
Who they didn't really know their father either. Their mother only knew him for about a week. I mean, this guy was a real cad. He was a womanizer. He was abusive. He was emotionally abusive, physically abusive. But the interesting thing is everyone that they encounter at preparing for the funeral and going through the funeral they all have all these nice things.
The people who knew their dad, right, in his later years.
The lawyer, the pastor of this church,
right? The undertaker, the nurse, that
cared for him because he died of cancer, and then the younger woman who turns out was his lover and the mother of yet another son, as well. Right,
and so there's all these people who are like they have fond memories of him, and now here's these two sons who none of them have ever they hated him, and so they have to kind of reconcile their own experiences with like all of these people who are giving them these other kinds of reports, and they're like, did we know him at all?
And that's one of the things I thought was interesting about the movie is it kind of explores this idea of, do we really know our parents? Do we know them? Like, we know our experience of our own parents. Do our kids know us, really? But, we think we know them. We're the center of their world, and they are this looming presence in our life. But they have a life beyond us, especially once we leave, and before we showed up.
And also, there was a lot in it that suggests, people can
change.
People can change, and people can be more complex than we think they are. I liked it because it was very character driven, and it allowed for the characters to grow and change.
Right. There was also a lot of dark comedy in it as well.
This is a dark movie, and
it's about death. So
right, and there were some
heavy moments.
There's also some language and some.
It wasn't nudity, but there was suggestion of extramarital activity.
Yeah, so not a kids movie, but it was good. I liked it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and having just lost my father a month ago,
I was a little bit concerned. Like about halfway through, I just sort of kind of hit me, and I'm like, "Is this really the movie to watch?" Like,
actually, I found it interesting. I mean, my dad was not abusive,
no,
by any means. But my parents were divorced, and I was, he was kind of out of my life for a long time, and it kind of brings home like that reality that my dad had this life outside of my experience of him. He had, and I saw it at the wake, for instance.
Right.
All these people who come to because they know my dad in various ways. So it was. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say cathartic. It's not like I cried through the movie or whatever, but I kind of wanted to see it because of that. I think it added an element to it. I really enjoyed the characters. Ray and Raymond were both interesting characters in their own right. They go through interesting journeys, and not necessarily, both of them ending up in the right place or a great place at the end, but not terrible,
Right. It's not one of those movies where like they have come to Jesus moments and like suddenly their lives turn around and are going to be better for it.
Yeah.
But it was a sort of but it was a good story.
Yes. It was.
There were a few moments where it felt like a play. The dialogue had sometimes some of the scenes, especially when it was just Ray and Raymond together, there were moments where I felt like I was watching a play that had been filmed with the particular rhythms or something about it and it reminded me that both Ewan McGregor and Ethan Hawke are people who have, done work on stage as well as on film.
Right. And
there was a quality about it that made me even wonder if maybe that had originally been a
stage play.
I don't think it was. The screenplay was written by the director, so I don't think he wrote it as a stage play and then turned it into a film.
Yeah.
But it had something of that quality to it.
Well, I think the fact that they were limited sets, limited locations, helped with that feeling.
Right. But it was also just something, a quality of the dialogue itself, the words and the way they spoke them. There's a certain measured quality to it. It's hard to put my finger on.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's something different in the delivery of a stage play versus a movie.
There's a quality to the dialogue that's much more conversational, I think, in stage plays often than in movies or TV.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the case here. It was the quality of the dialogue was much more casual. So that's how I kind of felt it. But a good movie, recommended. Apple TV Plus. Things we watch every time we watch it on Apple TV Plus. It's always been good. They keep a high standard. I haven't watched everything on Apple TV, so I'm sure there's things I wouldn't like, but the things that I have said, I might like that, we have. One of the things we're going to watch next on Apple TV is The Greatest Beer Run Ever. That looks good.
That does look good.
Yeah, which had a Vatican screening, which I'm dying to find out why. Like, what is it about this movie? It takes place at Vietnam.
Based on a true story.
Based on a true story. But that's for another time. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
The last thing we'll talk about in this segment is we watched today with the kids the new Star Wars Tales of the Jedi, which is a new animated series of short 15 to 20 minute pieces. 3 about the Jedi Ahsoka Tano and 3 about the Jedi turned Sith Count Dooku. Filling in, I think, gaps in the stories of what we know of them.
Right. Stuff that fit in kind of between Rebels and Clone Wars.
In the movies.
Yeah. I liked them a lot. The kids loved them.
Yeah.
I think that...
Baby Ahsoka is the cutest thing ever.
Oh, gosh.
Next to Grogu.
I think that if you haven't watched Rebels and Clone Wars, and if you're not like a sort of deeper fan, it might
go over your head.
Yeah, because they're really sort of the characters from the animated films.
Right. You do see Qui-Gon Jinn as Dooku's apprentice at one point.
Right.
You see the point at which Dooku moves fully over to the dark side and becomes a Sith apprentice.
Right. This really showed Dooku's journey from Jedi Master to Sith apprentice, and I liked that story. It also filled in a lot of Ahsoka's
her journey from when they first discovered she had Force powers to when she later on decided to get back into the fight after the Empire was in control.
Right, when she decides to join the rebellion.
So yeah, it was really good. It was really good. I want to watch them again because it all kind of goes by fast. And like I said, it's 6 episodes, 15, 20 minutes each. It's like an hour and a half. It doesn't take that long. So really good. If you're a Star Wars fan at the deeper level, a little bit deeper level, you'll enjoy it. And that's on Disney Plus. So let's talk about the homily this week. So the readings, just as a reminder, 31st Sunday in Ordinary Time, the gospel was about Zaccheus, the tax man.
Which is one of my favorite stories as a kid.
The chief tax collector in Jericho, who was short and wanted to see Jesus, so he had to climb a tree. Yep. I can identify with this man. So
I really liked Father Emmanuel's unpacking of this story.
Yes.
But he started off with telling a personal
story from when he was in seminary in Nigeria.
Right. He said when he was in seminary in Nigeria, they spent part of the time being sent to parishes, just like seminarians are here. But he was sent to a rural village where the people are in rural Nigeria, in the villages, people are very, very poor. Mm. And he said that the families took turns providing 1 meal a day.
Yes.
And so that was all he was getting, was 1 meal a day.
He was not used to 1 meal a day.
And he said he was very hungry. And then this elderly woman came, and she said that she wanted to bring him some food.
And she would start bringing him food every day.
And he said it was really some of the best food he'd ever eaten. It was really, really good. And so he was starting to look forward to her coming. And then the elders of the village came and they
told him he should not eat the food.
He should not eat the food from this woman because she had been a sinner in the past. She had gone to the city and she'd been engaged in prostitution. And therefore, this woman should not give you food. And he said,
shunned.
He said, here he is. This is the best food he's ever eaten. And he's very so hungry.
And the food is so good.
And he says to them, let her be. I don't know it personally. This is stuff from her past. It's not from the present. It's not really any of my business. He didn't explicitly draw the connection, but like, I'm thinking as I'm listening to this, well, Jesus would have taken the food from her.
Right. She was trying to do a good thing.
Right. In fact, perhaps she was in fact motivated. Yeah. Motivated by her sinful past. Certainly she was doing a good deed of, one of the corporal works of mercy of feeding the hungry.
The hungry seminarian. One of the things I liked about this is apparently in Nigeria, they call seminarians small father.
Little father.
Little father or small father. I thought that was very funny and very cute. I like that. Small father.
But he said like his role in the village was to be sort of a catechist and lead prayer services because these are places don't get a priest.
Yeah. The priest would come on a circuit. And so he was helping to catechize and, do services. What do they call communion service? So then he talked about the gospel itself, and he pointed out that the name Zaccheus is a word that means pure, which is ironic, given that he's the chief tax collector.
Right. He also filled in some background. He said that Jesus is entering Jericho, and at the gates of Jericho, he had cured a blind man at the entrance to the city who had begged to see him. And so he said that in a way we can see this story as being about seeing Christ and Christ seeing us, which I thought was a really nice reframing the story from what's left out or what's not included rather in the lectionary. And that Zaccheus also wants to see Jesus.
Right. Now, the gospel points out that he is short in stature, and Father says it's not just pointing out that he's physically small, but he, in the eyes of the other Jews, he's insignificant. He's small in their eyes because he's a collaborator with the Romans. We talked about this last week. Collaborator with the Romans. He steals from his people. That's just the job of a tax collector was to partially to steal from the people. He's a bad person.
So we're talking about moral stature as well as physical stature when we say he's small in stature. It explains the detail of why he needs to climb up the tree, but it also explains how he's perceived by the people around him.
Right. And he's been ostracized and isolated in society. He's basically what we would say is canceled. He's been canceled by society. And so we hear that then, Zaccheus has climbed a tree to see Jesus. And when he reaches the tree, Jesus looks up and speaks to Zaccheus. And Father said that's significant because Jesus raises his eyes to Zaccheus because Jesus has placed himself in the servant position below Zaccheus. Right. He has come to serve us. He's come to like later on, he'll tell the apostles to wash the feet of each other.
Right. This is Jesus's basic stance before humanity is he's come to serve, not to be served.
Yes. And Jesus says, today I must stay at your house. Not, is it convenient for me to come by? I might want to swing by later. No. I must stay at your house. There's an inner need, Father said. There's a need for Jesus to be there.
Because he sees him with love.
Right. And so Zaccheus receives Jesus with joy. He climbs down and receives Jesus with joy. He welcomes Jesus into his heart and into his home.
Another detail that Father pointed out that really struck me is that Zaccheus's name, the name means pure or righteous.
Right.
And that what Jesus calls him by name, he doesn't, like everybody else refers to him as the tax collector, but Jesus calls him by name, righteous one, pure one. And Jesus seeing him with the eyes of love, sees him as pure, just as God, that's what Jesus' mission is to see us as we should be, as we can be. When we repent of our sins, we will be pure in his eyes.
Right. And Zaccheus had to invite salvation into his home, to welcome salvation in, and only then could he receive the joy that he was seeking. And he was welcomed. He didn't repent first. He didn't throw himself down to Jesus' feet. Jesus said, I must stay at your house. And he said, welcome. Later is when Zaccheus, after this, at this point, but he welcomes him first, then he repents. He offers to do penance, to give away half of his possessions to the poor. And so he's welcomed into the kingdom not because he's already good. He was made good because he was welcomed into the kingdom. You know what I mean? That's the thing is we don't have to be perfected before where Jesus embraces us.
Right.
We are perfected when Jesus embraces us.
Right. Jesus reaches out to us in love, not as our judge, but as the one who wants to save us, the one who wants to serve us,
right? The
one who wants to love us, the one who wants us to welcome him. He's extending salvation, offering it to us before we repent. That is already on the table for us. He's giving it to us. Our repentance is our accepting what he's already given us.
Yes. It's not payment. Salvation is not payment for our repentance. Salvation is already on offer.
Right. Repentance is our response to the salvation which God has already given us.
It is the appropriate response. Yeah. I mean, and that it is, here's salvation. Are you going to take it? Now, we can reject it by refusing to repent, but if we repent, that is our acceptance. It's not you still have to repent, but the repentance is the acceptance, is that welcoming in. They're two parts of the same thing. I'm trying to think of if there's a better way to say it, but I think that's clear to say it. But Jesus, and in Jesus ends, salvation today. Salvation has come to this house, for the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost. This is Jesus's mission. People grumble, you're hanging out with a sinner. This is the mission, and that's what Father could, when he was a seminarian, he might not have had the wherewithal, the quick wit to say it at the time, but this is what he could have said to the village elders: "Is I am here not to just hang out with you righteous people, but to come and save the lost. She needs me too. She may need me more. And she's got yummy food.
And she's got yummy food.
And I'm hungry. So you're not giving me all that food. She is." So, yeah. Another good homily. I was thinking of this, we are so fortunate in the priests we have that there's a rotation of 4, maybe 5 or 6 priests that come through. Mm-hmm. The priests who serve the parish, and then the priests who come from the Holy Cross fathers. Father Willie, the Indian priest.
Father Pinto.
Father Pinto, and then there's the other American priest. He's the one who's been there the longest.
Father Gribble?
Yes, Father Gribble. And then Father Emmanuel. Father
is Father Emmanuel one of the Holy Cross priests?
I don't think so. I think he's one of the parish priests.
No, he's Nigerian. The parish priests are the
Cape Verdean and Haitian.
Yeah, Father Garcia and Father I can't remember.
He might be actually at BC at Boston College.
He might be. He might be a Jesuit.
Yeah. Well, in any case, we're a plethora of good priests, good homilists, and we are very blessed by them. As you, I'm sure, are well aware, if you've been listening to the podcast, we talk about them all the time. So it's been really awesome. All right. Shall we wrap things up? Let us take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Raising the Bets, including Katie K, Andrew W, Simon M, Sean D, and Ronald P. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue Raising the Bets and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And that's it for this time. Find links from our discussion in our show notes at sqpn.com/bets. That's BETTS. Send your feedback at the StarQuest Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send us an email at bets@sqpn.com or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. Remember to like Raising the Bets on the StarQuest Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on Twitter at SQPN and leave us comments wherever you find us. We love to interact with you. Until next time, I'm Dom Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
Thank you for listening to Raising the Bets on StarQuest. Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy. The Secrets of Technology. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/technology.